A production fee for your Hometown Health Connection was made by Buffalo Healthy Living Magazine and its sponsors.
As part of our commitment at WBBZ and Buffalo Healthy Living Magazine to take the shame out of talking about mental illnesses, we are bringing you the story of Karl Shallowhorn, a Buffalo native who is living successfully with bipolar disorder, and his work with the Erie County Anti-Stigma Coalition to help stop the stigma surrounding mental illnesses. We'll also talk about mental health first aid and how you can learn to help someone experiencing a crisis. I'm Samantha Latshaw. Welcome to your Hometown Health Connection. Mental health does not discriminate based on location, education, or socioeconomic status. It can affect anyone. Today's show is about love, hope, and triumph. Here to share his personal experience with addiction and bipolar disorder is survivor Karl Shallowhorn. With 28 years of experience in mental health and addiction as a clinician and advocate and educator, he is the chair of Erie County Anti-Stigma Coalition, a multimedia program to eliminate stigma. As a certified mental health first aid instructor, Karl has conducted more than 200 trainings, workshops on mental health and addiction-related topics. Karl is the author of Working on Wellness, a practical guide to mental health. He is the recipient of the National Federation of Just Communities and the Buffalo Association of Black Social Workers. Karl, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Samantha. Great to be here.
1 in 5 young people suffer from a condition of mental health. You've said when someone talks about it, it lifts off all this weight off of their shoulders. It makes such a huge difference that just having someone to talk about it, they don't even need a response. Talk to me about your personal experience and when you had your diagnosis with bipolar disorder.
Well, Samantha, I was very young. I was 18. I was a freshman in college. And like many other cases, I didn't have any previous experience with mental health issues. In fact, I was sort of blindsided. So the experience was really something that I wasn't prepared for. And I wasn't coping with it well after I did receive my diagnosis.
So talk to me about the turning point in your process on your way to recovery. What was the turning point to start getting treatment?
Well, I had received treatment all along for many years. Like I said, I was 18 when I had my first diagnosis, but I remember a very fateful conversation I had with my therapist when I was 25. And basically he said to me, either I go to rehab, I go to a 12-step meeting, or I end up back in the hospital. And I realized after my experience of being in the hospital probably 7 or 8 times in the previous years that I didn't want to go that route. Yeah. And I decided then to go through the route of a 12-step program. I was working, I didn't want to go to rehab, I didn't want to tell my boss I had a drug problem. So I took the 12-step route, and that's actually where my recovery truly began, where I realized that, at least for me, by putting down drugs and alcohol, it was the way to recovery.
So really being honest with yourself at that moment.
It was a real aha moment, to say the least.
When you were experiencing symptoms, did you have a feeling, did you know that you had bipolar disorder before you were diagnosed?
Well, so the story is, like I said, I had that first experience when I was 18. It was a major psychotic episode. I was basically in my dormitory room. I was catatonic, meaning that I wasn't responsive. Wow. I actually had a suicide attempt at the time. It was very severe. And so there was no disputing the fact that I had a mental health issue or challenge. So when I came home, I still struggled with acceptance, and a lot of people struggle with that acceptance. So it wasn't until I fully realized that if I kept the road, that road I was going down, I would never probably be able to be well.
At what point in your life did you feel that, you know, it's okay, I want to talk about my illness and speak publicly about it?
Well, that didn't happen until many years later. It was right around the time when Britney Spears was in the news, and interestingly enough, that was, of course, when people began to talk about her and her condition and her outlandish behavior. And I thought to myself, why don't we hear more positive stories about people living with mental health challenges in the media? So I was working at a local college, and I decided to write an article that ended up in the Buffalo News in the op-ed, my view section, where I simply asked that question, why don't we hear more positive stories? And I outed myself as having bipolar disorder. No one at the college knew.
Wow.
Many people, even in my own friendship circle didn't know quite the same way. So I really took a big risk, but it really was a turning point for me in my life.
That definitely takes some courage.
I didn't really know what I was doing at the time because I didn't know about stigma. And I didn't realize what a risk it was to me, my family, even my job at the time. But it turned out okay because of that risk.
Right, and on that note, with the stigma, Britney Spears, Kanye, the media has a way of poking fun, but then it makes it harder for those regular folks come out and speak about it.
Absolutely. So one of the things we know is that stigma actually prevents people from seeking help.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that we realize is that if we break down the stigma, if we encourage people to talk and raise awareness, people will seek help earlier, which will help them to get on that road to recovery.
You spoke about lying there catatonic. Talk to me about the toughest time in your recovery period.
Well, there's a lot. I've had experiences of being in the Buffalo Psychiatric Center in a ward with men who were very, very ill. I'll just leave it that way. I've had experiences of experiencing 4-point restraints. I've had some really traumatic experiences. But honestly, Samantha, the hardest time for me was when I'd gotten married.
Yeah.
I'd actually been okay for a while, but then I experienced another manic episode. My wife was pregnant with our first daughter. And that was, for me, the scariest experience because I realized how much I had to lose.
Wow.
Now, that was in 1995, and that was my last experience having a manic episode.
Yeah, that led me to my next question. Finding hope in that difficult time period. Talk to me about that.
I think the thing that gave me the most hope during that point was the support that I received. My wife Susie's amazing, and I will say that. We've been married now for over 26 years, and I really did discover in so many ways what unconditional love is about. So she gave me this understanding that by having family support, along with my extended family members, it was really important.
Hearing your story, it's so touching how you were able to go from that darkest period and find hope. If you're feeling isolated at home, alone and scared, what do you advise someone to do?
It's hard to reach out, especially if you feel like no one cares, but there are people who care. Right now, New York State has a emotional support line for COVID. There's also crisis services. There's also the idea of just calling a friend, reaching out to a friend, saying, I need help. It's important that people understand that if you find someone you can trust, if you talk to them, then that's one of the best things you could do, just to kind of get that weight off your shoulders and let them know that you need help.
What message do you have for loved ones who has a family member that has either attempted suicide or has died by suicide? What message do you have for them?
First and foremost, I feel so sorry for folks that are in those circumstances. Even myself, having had attempted myself, I know what I put my parents through. It was very difficult, but also in retrospect, I realized it wasn't their fault. In other words, I think sometimes people put the blame on themselves for these things, and the reality is people ultimately are responsible for their own actions. And sometimes, even though we know that there's things to look for, and there are warning signs. Sometimes we may not recognize those things, but we can't blame ourselves for that. And to recognize also that you can get help. There are resources for people who may be grieving for loved ones who have died by suicide.
Because it's an illness, just like any other illness.
Exactly.
When someone is in a situation like that decides to do something like that, it's an illness.
Exactly. And so we know that the majority of cases of individuals who die by suicide, there is an underlying mental health or substance use challenge associated with that. So the fact that there isn't a cause that might be seen as a weakness. Sometimes people feel that a person's weak or they're trying to take it out on someone. That's not the case. Usually there's something going on with a person like major depressive disorder or another condition that gets into a place of really just profound darkness in a dark place that they're in.
Right. Are there some tips or some exercises to keep you healthy?
Absolutely. So one of the things I do regularly is meditate. And I find meditation to be very helpful in that it grounds me. It allows me to relieve stress. And one thing that we know is that stress is a primary risk factor that contributes to individuals' mental health, especially during COVID. We're all under stress, so meditation is important, exercise is important, sleep. is really important. I can't stress how important sleep is to maintain our mental health. And then also, like I said before, having a good support system, people to talk to.
Absolutely. I'm personally not myself when I don't get my 8 hours of sleep, that's for sure. So your book, Working on Wellness, A Practical Guide to Mental Health, what can readers learn from it?
In the book, I was just trying to provide my own lived experience along with some tips. And so one thing I realized is that many people just oftentimes don't know what to do in certain situations or how to manage their mental health. So what I just tried to do was provide information that's very understandable, easy to access, and things they can do in their own lives to improve their well-being.
You wrote in your book that you felt that the mix of substance use was making your bipolar symptoms more frequent. Talk to me about that.
Well, there's certainly a connection between, they call co-occurring disorders. So if a person has say a mental health disorder like bipolar disorder with a co-occurring addiction disorder, it's a tough mix. It's a difficult condition to overcome, and they kind of feed off each other. So in other words, the substances that I was using made the bipolar disorder worse, but then again, I was using the substances to deal with the symptoms associated with the bipolar disorder. So it almost becomes like a vicious circle. And so by addressing these substance use is one way to hopefully minimize the symptoms that a person experiences with bipolar.
Sure. Gosh, it's definitely a tough, dark moment. Try to explain to viewers, to help if they have a family member or a loved one that has this, what does that feel like to go through a moment of state like this?
Well, there are a number of symptoms associated with bipolar disorder. One very much is, like I talked about, sleep. So I know even for now, sometimes I'll have trouble sleeping, getting to sleep or wake up in the middle of the night. That excessive energy, there might be racing thoughts, as we call it. Excessive spending, I know. That's one thing I actually didn't get into much, but sometimes people engage in excessive spending, risk-taking behaviors, things that might be uncharacteristically like the person that they wouldn't normally do. Yeah. But it's the kind of things that essentially be like those manic highs, those really high highs, followed by a major depression. So for me, for instance, I would experience a period of 2 to 3 weeks of very intense highs, but then I would follow with a period of up to 3 months or so, at least, of a really major depressive period, which is very hard to deal with.
Yeah. Would you describe those as early warning signs, perhaps?
Well, the early warning signs would be the things like I described, like if an individual's seen them like having trouble sleeping, or maybe that excessive spending. So we call that hypomania. And so if a person's experiencing hypomania, that's when you want to intervene and really kind of help them to identify what they can do to deal with those conditions.
With bipolar disorder and just general other mental health conditions, is that genetic?
It can be. So genetics is one of the risk factors for mental illness. But what I like to say is, and I mentioned this earlier, is the idea of early intervention. So if a person is suspecting that their child, for instance, has a mental health condition, get them help early. And we know that early intervention will be something that will prevent that problem from getting worse. And we also know that by doing so, there's a brighter future for that young child.
Right, it doesn't mean that just because mom or dad has it, it doesn't have to be the legacy for the family.
Exactly. We know that in many cases where it's almost unpredictable in some ways why some children do have this disorder and some don't.
Is there anything else that you would like to add in regards to generally mental illness, mental health, and bipolar disorder?
I think the one thing I just want to say is that there are so many resources for people now more than ever. Of course, I had my first episode in 1981. Before the internet, before a lot of the things we have now, a lot of self-help tools we have. So I would say use your resources. Don't be afraid to ask for help. National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI.org, is a great website for information. So educate yourself. That's one of the best things you could do.
Karl, thanks so much for sharing and being so open with your story today. You truly are a testament for those living with bipolar disorder, showing that you can live a long, successful, healthy life. If you would like to find out more, we have information you should write down. Connect with Community Health Center of Buffalo at 716-986-9199 and online at chcb.net. Go to this website, letstalkstigma.org. But if you need immediate assistance, give crisis services serving Buffalo and Erie County a call at 716-834-3131. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation with Karl, talking about mental health first aid and how you can learn to assist someone experiencing a crisis.
Buffalo Healthy Living Magazine is a free, full-color magazine distributed throughout Western New York. Now, more than ever, as we all want our families and friends to be safe and well, Buffalo Healthy Living Magazine is devoted to health, fitness, and nutrition for people of all ages. It's a great read and also has great recipes. Pick up Buffalo Healthy Living Magazine all over our hometown or go online anytime at buffalohealthyliving.com.
Welcome back to your Hometown Health Connection. I'm Samantha Latshaw. I'm continuing the conversation with Karl Shallowhorn, a mental health expert, a survivor of bipolar disorder. Mental health first aid can help professionals in law enforcement, education, and even the average person who wants to help someone in need. Think of CPR and someone having a heart attack. Mental health first aid works just like that, but first aid for physical injuries. Karl, talk to me about mental health first aid. How did it start and why?
Mental first aid started in Australia in 2000 and was adopted by the National Council for Behavioral Health in the states of Maryland, Missouri in 2008 here in the U.S. Since that time, it's actually had trained over 2 million people. Mm-hmm. And what it's designed to do is to raise awareness about mental health. It helps to teach people about the signs and symptoms of mental health crises, as well as a 5-step action plan, and it addresses stigma.
Right, so if you really want to help someone, this is a great course. You don't have to have like a background in mental health. This is a tips or basic education that you can get to be able to help others.
Well, absolutely. So it's designed for the layperson, mm-hmm. although I've taught the program to all kinds of professionals, even behavioral health professionals. Mm-hmm. But it's designed in a way that individuals can learn the basics about mental health. And it breaks down a lot of the misconceptions and myths around mental illness, as well as gives people the tools and how to respond in a crisis so they can help someone.
What does the class entail? Perhaps a brief breakdown.
Well, currently now we're offering virtually. Mm-hmm. Before that, it's an 8-hour program, so virtual and in person is both 8 hours. What is it comprised of is a PowerPoint, which basically gives more of an instructional feel to it. There's also videos, there's interactive exercises, a lot of group discussion, a lot of very rich group discussion about mental health, and opportunities for people to just learn from each other. All these sessions are provided in confidentiality-based format. So when people share, they're able to understand that when they do that, everything's going to stay within that room, or even though we call it the virtual room.
Karl, if someone wanted to take this course, Mental Health First Aid, what is the cost for, let's say, the average person, a group, or organization?
The Community Health Center Buffalo offers this program for free, no cost, through a federal grant. So there's no reason why anyone shouldn't be taking this program. It is accessible. It is very easy to do.
Wow, so even organizations would be free?
Absolutely. We just actually have provided in the last few weeks for organizations, so yes, it is free.
That's phenomenal. So if you really want to help someone, there's really no excuse. And right now is the time, because you have a lot of time on your hands and it's virtual.
Exactly. Very easy to do.
So what if I wanted to be an instructor in mental health first aid?
If you want to be an instructor for mental health first aid, you would go to the mental health first aid website, which is mentalhealthfirstaid.org, and there is a tab where you can just basically get the information on signing up to become an instructor. Right now, they're offering that program virtually.
And how much longer is that course and the cost?
Well, the course itself, the training is 5 days. The cost, I believe, is $2,000, but since it's virtual, you don't have to go anywhere. I had to travel to Michigan for my adult certification and Albany for my youth certification, so that actually helps that it's done virtually now.
Can organizations receive this type of education?
Absolutely. So over the years, I previously worked at Compeer and the Mental Advocates of West New York. I'm currently delivering the program through the Community Health Center of Buffalo. So we offer it to community-based organizations. We offer it to all kinds of organizations. So it is accessible for anyone.
So you mentioned, the average person, the layperson can take this course, anyone who would like to learn more and help others. But talk to me about professionals, for example, police officers or an educator. How can this benefit them?
Well, certainly in law enforcement, we know that there are certain situations that they come across where they might need to have a better understanding of how to have a mental encounter with someone living with a mental challenge that might be putting them or others at risk. So what it does is it gives a lot of tools for de-escalation. And that's offered in all the programs, but especially in the law enforcement form, it is given that information. And then for educators, there's a youth mental first aid program, which targets youth ages 12 to 18. So anyone who works with a youth that age is able to learn.
Right, I could see that being so helpful, especially like you mentioned in law enforcement with the de-escalation and not being so quick to jump to violence or pull the gun and recognize those preliminary symptoms.
Oh, for sure. And I've taught law enforcement. In fact, I've done trainings for the New York State Troopers, and it's called the public safety curriculum. So in the public safety curriculum, there are specific instructional videos that they use differently than they do in the traditional curriculum. There's different exercises. It's still based on that core mental first aid curriculum, but there are certainly some different aspects to it that would be geared more towards law enforcement.
Right, and for teachers, perhaps they think the child is just having a behavior type issue, but it's really something much more deeper.
Absolutely. So one thing we know too is that many times youth, when they are encountering some type of mental challenge, it's thought to be behavioral in nature. They're thought to have some type of disruptive behavior, when in reality it might be more mental health related.
What is the Anti-Stigma Coalition?
The Erie County Anti-Stigma Coalition is a group of 16 founding organizations that have come together to address stigma in our communities. So we were come together in 2015, and we've joined together to basically address stigma as it exists. We do this through our multimedia platform. We've done TV ads. We do a lot of social media. But our message is to join the conversation. So our website is letstalkstigma.org. And by coming to the website, you can take the pledge to end stigma. We have a variety of organizational members, meaning companies and organizations in the community that have also joined us in our cause.
So if I wanted to take the pledge to end the stigma, what does that look like?
You go to our website, like I said, at letstalkstigma.org. You agree to do certain things like not use stigmatizing language, continue to educate yourself, educate others, and also include your email address. So that's how you actually take the pledge. We also have a monthly newsletter that you can opt in for by taking the pledge.
Absolutely, that's some great stuff. You can only make change by working together on something like this.
Well, people say, what can I do to help? And there's a lot of ways that we can do things we can do to help. Everyone can be an advocate. You don't have to be like me doing things on the media or whatever. Anyone can just take the time to speak up. And the more we speak up collectively, the better off we're going to be.
If someone wanted to invite you to speak at their location, how can you be reached?
Sure, you can reach out to me at the Community Health Center Buffalo. My email address is kshallowhorn@chcb.net, or you can reach me at 986-9199, extension 4350.
And one last important message. What do you want our viewers to know?
I think I'll start by saying, like I began many years ago in that article I wrote in the Buffalo News, that recovery is possible. I've always believed that it's different for everyone, but we can all go beyond our self-perceived limitations. And so I would encourage anyone who feels that they may be struggling or knows someone that they can get through it.
Thank you so much for your time, Karl.
Thank you, Samantha.
Isolation, discrimination, shame, and embarrassment. These are the challenges people with mental illnesses often face. This stigma can prevent people from getting help. One of the best ways to stop the negative stereotypes surrounding mental health is to learn more about the illness. If you want to take the pledge to end the stigma of mental illness, visit letstalkstigma.org. If you're in a crisis or need immediate help, call the toll-free National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK or Crisis Services, serving Buffalo and Erie County at 716-834-3131. They are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All calls are confidential. And finally, the Community Health Center of Buffalo can be reached at 716-986-9199 and online at chcb.net. I'm Samantha Latshaw. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and be well.
A production fee for the preceding presentation of Your Hometown Health Connection was made by Buffalo Healthy Living Magazine and its sponsors.